This is a 1906 $20 gold piece. It's just barely, just a whisker under an ounce of gold. This is a 1922 Treasury gold certificate. And this equaled this. Therefore, the US dollar used to be, this is $20, the US dollar used to be worth 1/20th of an ounce of gold. Today, the US dollar is worth 1/2000th of an ounce of gold. This now costs $2,000. That is a 99% loss in value.
Our next speaker is the founder of GoldSilver.com. He's the author of The Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver. Please welcome to the Rebel Capitalist stage, Mr. Mike Maloney.
That's your girl, that makes that we the shit. F-R-E-S-H, we fresh. G-E-F, that's right, we definite.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you, thank you. So, I want to thank George for putting on a spectacular event. This presentation is going to be about the difference between money and currency. Everything you have heard at this conference so far could not happen if we used money. The crisis that we're going into is the result of a fiat currency regime. And I want to say that money is gold and silver, basically, the difference between money and currency. So Dan, if you could come up here and start by letting everybody feel this. And I want everybody to pass this through the audience back and forth, feel it, and then pass it to the next person. I bought this in 2002 for $6,500. It's $41,000 today, that one tube of Gold Eagles. Now, I've got to pay homage and respect to Robert Kiyosaki. He started my career. He launched me. Thank you. I got to get my clicker here. I had the privilege of touring the world with Robert back in the years 2005 through 2011. The first time I met Robert, he put me on stage in front of 300 people. The second time, 300 people. These were small events in Phoenix. Robert can draw an immense amount of people. This is the Los Angeles Convention Center. That conference peaked at 30,000 attendees. I missed the one before that in San Francisco, which had 60,000 attendees. There we are on stage, right there. And I used to have red hair, by the way. So this is Atlanta, and you can see in this one the sea of people that Robert can attract. And Robert likes to be surrounded by people that disagree with him. So he had the audacity to put a gold and silver guy on stage in front of a crowd of real estate flippers in 2005, 6, and 7. And that's what we're doing here. But people really responded. Then, actually, I've got to back up a little bit. In the summer of 2005, I wrote an email asking for a meeting with him and his wife, Kim. And I got an email back from his assistant saying I had 3 minutes backstage at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Robert was speaking to a group of about 5,000 people there. And they gave us front row seats. And at the lunch break, when everybody left the hall, somebody came and got me and took me backstage. The 3 minutes turned into 20. And at that point, I asked Robert if I could be the Rich Dad advisor for precious metals. And he said, well, we'll see. First, you got to write a book, and I want you to come to Phoenix, and we'll talk about it. And so I wrote Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver. Robert got this published for me. I wrote a 3,000-page textbook with fact after fact after fact that just went on that would have sold 10 or 20 copies, and it would have been a reference piece. Robert gave me an editor that helped me boil this down to something that told a story and was understandable. And then Robert got it published for me, and it quickly became the best-selling book on investing in precious metals in history. Thank you. Just February, I launched The Great Gold and Silver Rush of the 21st Century. And my first book was still the best-selling book on precious metals. This eclipsed it very quickly. And the first day, it climbed up to number 104 on Amazon. Now, there are millions of books on Amazon. 104 is hard to attain, and it did this on the first day. But by the second day, Amazon had changed it to a video game. It was listed as a video game, and it fell to number 12,000 on Amazon very quickly. I am now on the Homeland Security's PNR list, the Passenger Name Registry, which they use to investigate and prosecute terrorists. I was blocked from checking in to my flight to come here, and that's when I discovered this. I don't know if it's because of what I wrote in this book, but you may want to get a copy before they're confiscated. So, in that meeting with Robert backstage, I could hear all the people coming back into the hall, and then we're in back of the curtain, and you could hear Robert's name being said over the speakers, and he goes, "I've got to go back on stage right now, but I'd like you to stay back here and then come out and tell them about when Nixon took us off of gold in 1971." And so that was Learning Annex Wealth Expo. But just before I came out, I'm standing backstage, and I hear Robert say, "In 1971, the dollar ceased being money and became currency." And that was a light bulb moment for me. Bing! And I have spent from that day, this was back in 2005, so 18 years, I've been studying the difference between currency and money. So what is money? I have toured 6 national money museums: the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the Bundesbank in Germany, Beijing Monetary Museum in China, the Japanese Monetary Museum in Tokyo, and the Australian Money Museum. I have seen literally every medium of exchange that mankind has ever used, and they all headed toward the dustbin of history. All these currencies, thousands upon thousands of them, none of them are being used today, except 2. There are 2 of those thousands of currencies that persisted throughout the centuries: money, gold, and silver. So what is money? The first person to really think deeply about what money is was Socrates. And so this is quite a while ago. Now, I have here, it's Athena on one side, Pegasus on the other, from the 4th century BC. So this was minted prior to 500 BC. Socrates, I busted this open and I held it because Socrates may have held this coin. I would bet you that today, if you melted this down, this silver in here, that it'll buy you relatively the same amount of bread as it did back then. This is money. Everything else is currency. So Socrates thought about this, and he said that there are some key attributes of money. Money is a medium of exchange, it's a unit of account, and it must be a store of value. And this is one of the most important things. And recently, another authority has chimed in on this. And what this authority said was that first, so this is off of their page on the internet of what is money. First, money is a store of value. And then the rest of it isn't written that well. If I work today and I earn $25, I can hold on to the money before I spend it because it will hold its value until tomorrow, next week, or even next year. Okay, so let's see how well the dollar has done under the Federal Reserve's stewardship. The dollar in this chart here that I generated just a couple of days ago, this is from the inception of the Federal Reserve until April 1st of this year. So this is the Federal Reserve's April Fool's joke on all of us. The dollar has lost purchasing power to where today it is worth the 1913 dollar has gone to where it's only buying 3.2 cents worth of goods and services compared to what it could buy back then. So it has that is a 96.8% drop in value. However, if you want to measure it against gold, this is a 1906 $20 gold piece. It's just barely, just a whisker under an ounce of gold. This is a 1922 Treasury gold certificate. And this equaled this. Therefore, the US dollar used to be, this is $20, the US dollar used to be worth 1/20th of an ounce of gold. Today, the US dollar is worth 1/2000th of an ounce of gold. This now costs $2,000. That is a 99% loss in value. And just as a side note here, I picked this up when I was at the Bundesbank. This is a €250,000 after they've lived past their useful life and they shred them. I don't know if you can buy these from the Federal Reserve or not. I haven't checked. But these are on their way to being this. This is an empty graph. And on the side here, I've got a scale going from 100% down to 0%. On the bottom, I've got a logarithmic graph of time, 1 day, 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. What is the point, what is the point at which stop calling a currency money if it is losing value, its loss in purchasing power? Is it if it loses 10% in 100 years? Is it if it loses 50% in 100 years? Is it like the US dollar, where it loses 96.8% to 99% of its purchasing power in its 110 years since that the Federal Reserve has been around? Or is it if it goes to 0 in 100 years, but in the meantime it purchases something? Is it if it goes to 0 in 10 years, 1 year, 1 day? I would think that all of you would agree. If you worked 8 hours today and at the end of that day you got paid something and you could buy something with it right away, but if you held it until tomorrow, it would buy nothing. We could not call that money. What rate of decay does currency break that promise of being a store of value? Gold has been a store of value for 2,500 years and bounces up and down in this range of purchasing power depending on what other mediums of exchange it's competing with, how many mediums of exchange are out there, and how many goods and services are in a society. So for 2,500 years, it has held its value, and today, this one coin that you can put in your pocket will buy you $2,000 worth of stuff, and that tube that somebody around here is passing around that's $40,000 worth of eagles, that tube, I mean, you can put a couple of them in your pocket and you can go in and buy a car. It has maintained its value throughout the centuries. This is a Federal Reserve note. What is a note? A note is an IOU. Here's my note for $1 million. And so this is a $10,000 note, and on the bottom of this note, it says right here, it will pay the bearer on demand $10,000. This is not money. They're admitting right there that this is a claim check on money. You bring it in, and they will pay you $10,000. This is not $10,000. And it says right here that it's redeemable in gold on demand at the United States Treasury. I find this highly entertaining because the Federal Reserve is not part of the government, it's not part of the Treasury. It's a private cartel owned by the member banks of the Federal Reserve System. So if they're saying that the Treasury will pay you, it's like me making out a note that says, I owe you $1 million, George Gammon will pay you. Then underneath it, it says, or in gold or lawful money. So it's gold from the Treasury or gold or lawful money, again admitting that this is not money because this bill is lawful, at any Federal Reserve bank. What is the lawful money they're talking about? That's a U.S. Treasury note. The Federal Reserve note was fractionally backed. The Federal Reserve Act required that the currency that they create be 40% backed by gold. In other words, for every $100 worth of these claim checks, 5 of these claim checks, they only had to have 2 $20 gold pieces you needed these claim checks to be able to claim. That is fraud. And so they were committing, the Federal Reserve was legally allowed to commit fraud. But this says this certifies that there have been deposited in the Treasury of the United States of America $10,000 in gold coin payable to the bearer on demand. This is something that I used to use to teach the difference between currency and money many years ago. I think I started presenting this live back in 2010 through maybe 2013, and I stopped using it for some reason. But people find it very entertaining. So this is a can of Campbell's tomato soup under the gold standard. It was originally in 1898. Campbell's soup was 10 cents. And it varied between 8 and 10 cents for the next 73 years up until Nixon took us off. He took us out of the Bretton Woods monetary system, which disconnected the last vestiges of a gold standard from the US dollar. And on that day, all of the world's currencies became fiat currencies. Remember that. We are living through the largest financial experiment in history. This is the first time in all of history that all the world's currencies are fiat simultaneously. And so what happened after he did that? Well, the price of tomato soup doubled and then doubled again, and now it's in its fourth doubling since then. When it hits $1.60, it will have doubled 4 times. That is exponential growth, just like our currency supply. So I didn't realize, there were 2 chapters cut from my book at the very last second because it was just going to be too big. I wanted to print it all in color on this high quality paper. It's very heavy for a book of its size. It was going to be too expensive, and this chapter I didn't realize wasn't really done. So I cut it from the book. It's available for free online at ggsr21.com. And what I didn't realize was that back when I used to present this live, I was only telling half the story. The other half had remained untold. You saw the symptom of inflation of the currency supply, which is loss of purchasing power in the unit of the currency, which results, the mirror image of loss of purchasing power in the currency is rising prices. So that is the symptom, not the disease. Can you go? Okay. So what I should have done was erased the scales on the side and changed them into cans of soup, and then inverted the price of that can of tomato soup. And what is the price of $1? How much does $1 cost? The average person doesn't think this way. They're transacting in dollars. They think they can buy things. But when you buy something, you're simultaneously selling your currency. Here, the dollar was very, very expensive before Nixon took us off of the gold standard. You're standing on one side of the cash register. The grocer is standing on the other side. The grocer is trying to buy that dollar from you with his goods that he carries. And it used to cost him 10 cans of tomato soup to buy that silver dollar from you. And that was when we used money. Now we use the evil fiat currency. And the price of $1, the value of $1, dollar is now cheap, real cheap. It only costs the grocer two-thirds of 1 can of tomato soup. So that was the other half of the story. This is the value of the currency plummeting. That's what causes inflation. That's for free in Chapter 3 on GGSR 21. A combo meal. In the United States, your average combo meal is around $10, or 4/10 of an ounce of silver. In Japan, it's 1,350 yen, or 4/10 of an ounce of silver. In Malaysia, it's 150,000 rupees, or 4/10 of an ounce of silver. In Venezuela, it's 25 million Venezuelan bolivar, or 4/10 of an ounce of silver. A base model Volkswagen Golf is 28,000 in the United States, or 14 ounces of gold, 3,800,000 yen in Japan, or 14 ounces of gold, 400 million in Indonesia, or 14 ounces of gold, and 70 billion bolivar, I like saying that, it makes me sound like Carl Sagan, billions and billions, or 14 ounces of gold. Why is this? Why have we introduced, we went away from money, and we introduced this nightmare of floating exchange rates where governments can just actually pillage and plunder their own populations by printing currency, creating currency units, diluting the currency supply, transferring wealth from the population to the government. So, I'd like you all to turn to each other, introduce yourself to your neighbor, and talk about that for just a couple of minutes, and I'll stop you in just a few minutes. And stop. So, you've just talked about some of the different